A few days ago, I made a video about the assumptions that people have towards disabilities or people with disabilities. And it was a little more on the general side of things, focusing on all and any forms of disabilities. So I thought this week, why not do something that is a little more specific and make a video on assumptions that people have about wheelchairs or wheelchair users. So let's get right into it. Assumption number one, most people think that being in a wheelchair is confining or that wheelchairs place a limitation on the wheelchair user. And the opposite is actually true. Imagine this scenario: you have difficulties walking, or you can't walk at all, like me. A wheelchair can actually be a lifesaver. For with it, you will be able to maybe get off the bed, go outside, see the world a little bit more. Your wheelchair actually becomes a liberation thing, a weapon of your liberation. So, contrary to popular belief, wheelchairs are not a form of imprisonment, they are actually a form of liberation. Wheelchairs give wheelchair users independence, which is something that a lot of people, especially with disabilities, fight for every single day of their lives. So, wheelchairs are not just confining, they are liberating. Assumption number two is that wheelchairs are only used by people who have paralysis, who are paralyzed, or people who are disabled. Just because someone is in a wheelchair, it doesn't automatically mean that they can't stand up or they can't walk. Sometimes people do need to use wheelchairs temporarily for a wide variety of reasons. Some could have a medical condition that gives them a lot of chronic pain, or they can't walk very long distances due to fatigue or any other issues, and they may need to make use of wheelchairs for a limited amount of time. So next time you see someone who is in a wheelchair standing up and walking, it doesn't mean that they've been faking it, but it simply means that maybe they were not paralyzed to begin with. The next assumption that a lot of people make is that wheelchair users always need a lot of help or always need some kind of assistance. This may be true. In some instances, there are wheelchair users who do need to get help from time to time, depending, of course, on the kind of injury that they have or the kind of activity that they are doing. Sometimes you can do certain things by yourself, and sometimes you need help. However, in most cases, wheelchair users don't need as much help as people think. While some of us may need help from time to time, this does not apply to everyone. Not every wheelchair user needs help always. In most cases, wheelchair users adapt very well to their way of life and are quite comfortable with their day to day activities. In the event that you notice someone who you may think may need help, the best thing to do is to ask that person if they need your help. If the wheelchair user says yes, they would need or appreciate some help, what you can do, and this is always the best, you need to ask them how best you can assist them. And this is important because it helps to avoid unnecessary injury, maybe to the wheelchair user, or damage to their actual wheelchair, or just maybe avoid unnecessary embarrassment and awkward situations. If you ask them and they say no, they don't need your help, the best thing you can do is to respect their wishes and not push the issue further. One assumption that people have about wheelchair users, and I find this rather funny actually, to be honest, is that people think wheelchair users or people in wheelchairs only hang around carers or caregivers. Sometimes it's necessary for us to remind each other that wheelchair users are human beings too. And that means we also have families, we have friends, spouses, siblings, colleagues, We have social lives too, and don't assume that just because we are with someone, they are our caregiver. Sometimes they're just our friend. Whenever you see a wheelchair user out and about going about their business, accompanied by one, two, or maybe a couple of people, don't assume they are their carers or their caregivers. They could literally be anyone: business partners, friends, spouses, you name it. So that assumption really needs to go away. The next assumption is an assumption that I must admit that while I was growing up, I also had this assumption that wheelchair users cannot drive. Usually, all that's required, or most of what's required for a wheelchair user to be able to drive their own car or vehicle, is a few modifications to the car itself. These modifications are usually put in place so that they can accommodate the needs of the wheelchair users. Some of the more common modifications that the vehicles may need usually or typically include raising the foot pedals so that they become a little bit easier for the wheelchair user to reach, or you can reposition the pedals depending on their needs, of course, or you could completely replace the foot pedals with hand controls so that the wheelchair user can do everything that it needs to do on the vehicle just using his hands. Sometimes, before these measures can actually be implemented, the wheelchair user would need to be thoroughly assessed by an occupational therapist who can then advise on whether the user is suitable or fit enough to drive, or what kind of modifications they would need in order to make this a possibility. But otherwise, if they get the thumbs up sign, then why not drive? Personally, I can't wait to own my own modified vehicle and get to drive myself a little bit. In my opinion, the next assumption is probably one of the biggest assumptions that people have towards people in wheelchairs or wheelchair users. And this assumption is that wheelchair users cannot speak for themselves. This happens way too much, and it's really, really, really frustrating. If I started giving you examples of times when I encountered this kind of stereotyping in my own life, would be here forever. Please do not, and I repeat, do not assume that just because someone is a wheelchair user, they are unable to hold a conversation. Unless indicated, please do not automatically think that the person I'm with will speak on my behalf, will act on my behalf, and will also do my thinking for me. I feel like the main reason why most people do this is because they think or assume that a physical disability also means a cognitive disability. This is not always the case. Also, this is very important, guys. When you are talking to someone who is in a wheelchair, there is absolutely no need to use babyish voices when talking to an adult just because they are in a wheelchair. So now let's move right along into some bonus assumptions. And I'm calling these bonus assumptions because I've already covered the majority of them in the video that I did earlier, where I was talking about disabilities in general. So we are just going to skim through this one so that we don't waste too much time talking about them again. One, wheelchair users cannot have sex or be intimate or have families. I'm not going to talk about this again, but guys, being in a wheelchair doesn't mean you cannot have sex. Even when you have a spinal cord injury, sex is still a possibility in the majority of cases. If you need more information, this one, just Google, ask around, do your research, and you will learn more about disability and sex. I know it's a topic of concern or curiosity for a lot of people. Remember, your life is a gift. Make it count. See you on the next video. Look at the video. I'm cold. I'm cold. I think we should go home, guys. I'll upload another one. I don't know. I can't do a video today. It's really cold. No cameras. I'm done.